What's up, guys? Matchstick Gamer here, and I just kind of want to talk about an article I seen while scrolling around on Facebook titled 13 Reasons Why Dragon Ball GT is the Worst in the Franchise. Now, I don't necessarily agree with everything that is listed here, and some of these things I think are a tad strange to say. I'll get into that later. Apologize about any background noise. A train happens to be going by in my area, and I just want to knock this out fast. Real quick, obvious disclaimer. Do not go and harass the person that wrote this article, or the site itself, or the owners of this website, etc. Do not harass anybody that has any association with this site, as posted on the site, blase, blase, blase. Can't stress that enough. Don't want anybody to get in trouble for harassment, and I don't want anybody to be harassed. I don't condone that. So with that said, let's get into it. So the author says the following here. So he types, Dragon Ball Z will forever be the true gateway anime. I guess. I mean, maybe back in the 90s. But nowadays, like, I think most people have different gateway animes because Dragon Ball's not as big as it was in the 90s. That's not to say it isn't big now. I mean, the Broly movie shows that it certainly still is big by today's standards. It made a crap ton of money. Anyways, hooking children of the Toonami era with explosive battles, memorable heroes, compelling villains, and a fantastical universe of endless possibilities. Okay, fair enough on that. Dragon Ball is ingrained in not just the history of anime, but pop culture as well. Being so explosively popular globally, it's no surprise that Toei Animation, the studio that brought the DBZ anime to television, wanted to keep the Dragon Ball rolling. Okay? With only some designs and limited input from the original series creator Akira Toriyama, Toei created Dragon Ball GT, which stands for Grand Touring. But in this case, it was a tour of mediocrity. The series was not up to the Spirit Bomb-sized chip on its shoulder, and it ended up being the shortest of any Dragon Ball series, while its successor, Dragon Ball Super, has been met with far greater acclaim. Let's look back on the reasons why DBGT failed to power up compared to those that came both before and after. Now, I wouldn't technically call Dragon Ball Super the proper successor to GT. The reason I say that is because technically there was Dragon Ball Z Kai, or Dragon Ball Kai as it's just called in Japan, which is technically speaking just Z cutting out the filler, and it's touched up quite a bit. And I believe some things are redrawn a smidge in like computer and stuff to improve on some things and some other issues, but otherwise, if you want to be technical, yes, it's technically Z with the filler cut out, but that would technically be the successor series, since it technically is in that series after GT, but not, like historically in universe-wise or anything. It's just the next series after it that they made. Anyways, number one, series creator Akira Toriyama was hardly involved, so let's see what their first reason is. Exactly here. What made GT seem like such a cash grab on the franchise was that it wasn't based on the existing manga and had little involvement from the series creator Akira Toriyama. Toriyama did contribute some designs and story ideas to the new team, but he was mostly hands-off. This illustrated how tonally, I may have misread that, I don't know, different the series is from DBZ without Toriyama's involvement. GT simply lacks the same magic as its predecessor. GT did lack Toriyama's input. He designed early Season 1 things. He didn't have any story input whatsoever. He designed the logo that everybody knows GT for. He designed a lot of the early Season 1 character designs, so, Goku, Pan, Trunks, Giru, some of the planets, and he designed the, well, we'll discuss that later. We'll get into that later. So, I don't know if I personally agree that GT was bad because it didn't have Toriyama's input. And for the record, it's no secret I don't like GT, but I'm not going to let somebody sit here and say some BS that is ultimately extremely subjective or simply untrue. So with this, I wouldn't say it was necessarily bad because it lacked Toriyama's input, because if we go and look at like Heroes, which I think is actually doing pretty good, and I like Heroes, I ain't going to say it's the best thing I've watched, but certainly not the worst. And a lot of people like Heroes, and it's doing very well financially speaking, so... And that's nothing from Toriyama. In fact, I argue it's pretty much about the same level as GT had from Toriyama, maybe less. And it's doing okay, so, I mean, clearly, just because Toriyama doesn't necessarily have his hand in the pot, so to speak, doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be bad. So, I wouldn't necessarily say Toriyama's lack of involvement in GT is what made it bad. And I'll get into why I think GT ultimately failed later, because I think there's a logical reason here. Anyways, next argument. Fan favorite characters are pushed aside. GT has a tunnel vision-like focus on Goku, and sadly many fan favorites are thrown to the wayside. By the wayside, Tien and Chaozu all but vanishing, along with Yamcha. Fat Buu is rendered useless, and Oob and Vegeta come back with a terrible fashion sense, only to be assimilated by a new villain, Baby. While the franchise has been known to focus on its core characters, GT manages to push away its fan favorite anarchy cast even further. Good God, I probably mispronounced that. Really, whenever I think about Dragon Ball, one thing that Dragon Ball doesn't do real well, unfortunately, is focus on its characters. That's been an issue from the start. That's not to say it's always been bad about it, but I mean, you can go and watch, like, Dragon Ball, and a lot of characters we've seen, you know, they just forget about. Now, granted, they weren't, like, necessarily part of the main core cast, and a lot of them get shoved to the side. So, I mean, this is nothing new. I don't know if GT necessarily did it worse, but it's nothing new. I will say that a lot of the other series did use the characters a lot better by comparison, but not so much significantly so that it's too much different. So there's that. So reason number 3, GT's conclusion is unsatisfying. Goku finally manages to defeat the evil dragon Sin Shenron with a massive spirit bomb, but instead of Goku finding a cure for his youth or settling down with his family, the original Shenron returns to say he's leaving the Earth and taking the Dragon Balls with him until the people are ready again. After one last wish, reversing all the death and destruction, Goku goes with Shenron, making some final goodbyes before departing with the dragon. Goku's ghost does return 100 years later to witness his descendants fight. Witness his descendants fight Vegeta's at a martial arts tournament. But needless to say, ending the hero's saga like this did not sit well with many fans. I don't know if it necessarily did. In fact, it's actually caused a lot of theories to spawn out of it. So, if anything, leaving it as ambiguous as they did actually was kind of good because it gave fans something to talk about and discuss. So, I wouldn't say ending GT the way they did was bad. I mean, even then, like, you go and, like, look at, like, how Z originally ended. It wasn't really too different, per se. Like, Goku just flies off with Oob. I've heard people complain about the ending arguably as much as I've heard people complain about the GT ending in some capacity, and both of them arguably have good fan fictions based off of what happens next. You know, like, there's fan manga of Goku taking Oob and training him, and there's fan manga about what happens after GT. The Dragon Ball AF manga is a prime example of that, if anything. So, I would say that this was bad. I certainly wouldn't say it's a reason why GT itself was quote-unquote bad. Okay? Number 4. To even the playing field, Goku is turned into a kid. By the end of Dragon Ball Z, Goku was the strongest fighter in the known universe, capable of putting an end to cosmic threats like Majin Buu. To insert more danger and conflict to GT, and recapture some magic from the original Dragon Ball series as well, the writers made the decision to turn Goku back into a child. Rather than create an interesting arc for the main character, DBGT writers decide to take the easy way out. It was a refreshing, especially at the time, to see see cartoon personalities change and evolve, and this gimmick sucked the air out of any potential character growth for Goku. Yeah, I'm going to unfortunately have to agree with this one. I think that one of the worst things that Dragon Ball GT did was turn Goku into a kid, and I think that's a valid criticism to have for GT. And I know I'm not the only person that thinks this and has said this. A number of other YouTubers, much bigger than myself, and much more credible. Not to say that I'm not credible, it's just they have more credibility because they're more well-known and have proven themselves. I still have a ways to go. So, yeah, I think that's a fair thing to say. I don't think, I honestly, turning Goku into a kid was actually a bad decision, so I don't think it helped GT none and might have hurt it. They could have done better in that area. So, gonna give them that one. I'll be fair on that one, giving them that one. Pan and Giru are annoying characters. So this is number 5. Instead of interesting characters like Goten, Goku, on his quest to fetch Black Star Dragon Balls, is accompanied by annoying side characters like Giru and Pan. Like the rest of the series, these two characters never really develop, making them both annoying and uninteresting. Pan and Giru are more or less the franchise's failed attempt at comic relief akin to Dragon Ball, but this proves to be relentlessly aggravating. Yeah, I'm going to agree that Pan's annoying. I didn't find Giru annoying personally, but Pan was annoying in GT. Now, granted, they didn't really have too much to work off of when developing a Pan that was older, because all they had way back when was how she's depicted in the original manga and at the end of Z in the anime. So, to be fair, they didn't have much to work with, but Pan was ultimately annoying. I think they could have done a better job with their character, and I don't think that's how Pan would have necessarily developed. I mean, I could be wrong, but I guess we'll see if Toriyama ever decides to age her up himself past what we've seen in the end of Z. So, maybe Toriyama's depiction and vision of how Pan acts will be different from what GT writers thought, but Pan was annoying. I don't know if that necessarily hurt GT any, but I certainly didn't like her, and I think that's a valid criticism, so kind of giving them this one halfway. Okay. GT killed off a beloved character, number 6. Okay. Dragon Ball is a franchise in which characters die quite frequently. This is true. However, the plot usually manages to bring them back through one magical resolution or another. Piccolo, on the other hand, is not so lucky. Thanks to the pointless Black Star Dragon Balls, Piccolo sacrifices himself, and unlike countless other resurrected characters, remains deceased. This death feels cheap and unwarranted in the series, creating drama for drama's sake. It did kind of suck that he killed off Piccolo. I don't think they really utilized Piccolo very well. It almost makes it sound like I'm justifying his statement above, where he talks about how they didn't really use characters very well here. But I mean, it kind of sucked that they killed off Piccolo. I'm not saying that, you know, Piccolo was an extremely integral character, but they just did him wrong. So I personally didn't like how they did that. Am I saying this affected GT at all? No, but it really sucked that they did this. And again, I guess halfway on this one just for personal opinion. Vegetas Mustache enough said. This is number 7. In the span of time between Dragon Ball Z and Dragon Ball GT, Vegeta, Prince of all Saiyans, an arch-rival to Son Goku, grew a pencil-thin mustache. Writers were probably trying to illustrate how Vegeta was growing older, especially since Saiyans physically age much slower than humans, but this was not the way to do it. Even Vegeta's own daughter calls him out on his facial hair fence and tells him to shave it off as soon as possible. The mustache makes this fan-favorite character absolutely laughable, but thankfully it doesn't long. Okay. So, first of all, he accuses the writers here. Now, maybe, I'm not sure how many people watching this know this, but fun fact, this is actually something Toriyama came up with for the series. This is one of the designs that Toriyama came up with. So, yes, if someone's going to get blamed for this terrible mustache design, unfortunately, it has to be series creator Akira Toriyama. Toriyama came up with Mustache Vegeta. I didn't like the design much, and normally I like Toriyama's designs. However, I'm not going to sit here and say this affected GT in any way, shape, or form, so I'm not even giving them halfway on this one. Me personally, I didn't like it, but do I think this made GT the quote-unquote worst series ever? No. And ultimately, this is something Toriyama did. This is Toriyama's handiwork, and I'll provide a link down below in the description of what exactly Toriyama actually has done for GT, because Kanzenshuu.com has a nice little section where it details what Toriyama did do for GT, which again was very little admittedly, but he did do some things, but it was very, very small. So, yeah, this is Toriyama's fault, not the writer's fault at all. So, if you're going to blame anybody, unfortunately, it's got to be Toriyama. But am I going to say this initially affected or ruined or made GT bad? No. By no stretch of the word do I think it did that. Alright, moving on. Number 8. Previous big bads are used as comic relief. And then we have a picture of Cell and Frieza in Hell being frozen. Deviating from the tone of DBZ, GT attempts to work in some humor into the series. Unfortunately, the writers do so at the expense of former villains Frieza and Cell, are two of the most intimidating big bads to ever grace the franchise, and their appearance in GT are underwhelming, to say the least. Not to mention, these antagonists are often played for comic relief rather than imposing physical threats. Yeah, they did unfortunately relegate them to comic relief. They weren't really as threatening as they used to be. Super doesn't quite do it to the same degree as GT did with Frieza. There are some comedic moments with Frieza, but it's not this bad. So, I don't know if this has necessarily made GT a bad series, but it certainly didn't help either, so halfway. Number 9. The Black Star Dragon Balls are a pointless plot device. GT introduces audiences to the Black Star Dragon Balls. They never before mentioned plot device similar to the regular wish-granting Dragon Balls, but with a few key differences. Firstly, these Black Star Dragon Balls summon a red Shenron rather than a green dragon, as seen in previous seasons/series. Secondly, and far more importantly, they carry the unfortunate side effect of planet explosion if not regathered in a year's time. The new Dragon Balls are only serve to create needless, uninteresting drama, lazily retreading old story beats. I don't know if I can agree or disagree with this one, because the Black Star Dragon Balls were only used in the first season, and it was kind of introduced in an odd way. There were a lot of issues there because suddenly the radar couldn't pick them up before. I mean, there are a number of issues even after Kami and Piccolo fused back together. Let's just say hypothetically they were stones before they fused back together in the original series, Kami and Piccolo. Well, then once they fused together, shouldn't the radar been like, hey, there are multiple sets of Dragon Balls on Earth? But no, they just introduced them out of nowhere. There was no logical reason given, so you can say it's bad story writing in some regard. So I guess I'm gonna give a little bit more halfway, but 100% on this one. Number 10, the 90s rap theme is absolutely cringeworthy. GT's 90s rap style theme was never going to stand the test of time, but it is arguably the worst intro for any Dragon Ball series. Rock the Dragon is no stairway to heaven, but it is much better than this irritating tune. Not to mention, GT's hardcore theme song is a far cry from the more serious, more jovial tones. I didn't like the rap theme very much. I like the Japanese theme a bit more, but this comes down to subjectivity. Music is an art, and art is subjective, so I can't give this to him. The only thing I can agree with is maybe it's not going to stand the test of time, because, I mean, you can look at, like, old series and go, yeah, this probably wasn't a good choice. You know, things like that. So, somewhat, but not really. Number 11. The fights aren't memorable. Even with incredible art, interesting characters, and compelling plot lines, the Dragon Ball franchise is known for its epic, world-shattering fights. Thanks to an underpowered Goku and associates running into some rather wacky aliens and other misfits who wouldn't be nearly as threatening in previous series, GT is unable to deliver on a legacy of memorable fights. And when worthy foes do occasionally enter the picture, they usually meet a rather anticlimactic end. I can't really think of too many fights off the top of my head that were interesting for GT, and granted, I don't watch as much as the others, but none of them really stand out to me per se, so there might be something to this, but this also might come down to subjectivity, so I'm going to let anybody watching this decide on that one. So for you guys watching, comment down below on what you think about number 11 here. Are there any fights in GT that are memorable to you off the top of your head? Like, thinking about everything in Dragon Ball, is there anything in GT in terms of fighting specifically, fight scenes, that are memorable to you versus, say, something from back in Dragon Ball Z, original Dragon Ball, or even Super if you want to lump that in? Okay? Number 12. The villains are forgettable. Dragon Ball Z featured intimidating, compelling villains like Frieza, Cell, and Majin Buu, while GT's roguish gallery of is rather forgettable. Baby, for example, is a generic villain with cliche motives, and the series finale villains, the Evil Dragons, end up being yet another wasted concept thanks to their boring designs, lack of personalities, and dull battles. I wouldn't say all the villains are like that. Like, there's a lot of people that like Baby and remember him, so he's a pretty memorable villain from GT. A lot of people like Super 17. I didn't like his art too much, but, you know, his design was pretty good. The Shadow Dragons, most of them aren't actually very memorable. I mean, let's be honest. Whether you're a hardcore fan of GT or hate it, whatever the case is, like, surely you don't remember every single Shadow Dragon. I mean, I'm sure some of you are going to go down the comment section, I remember, and start typing out names, maybe even submitting picture links or whatever, but if you're being honest with yourself and not going to Google to look all this up, like, do you really remember? Most of the Shadow Dragons people typically remember are, like, you know, like Ice and Nova Shinron and Sin Shinron, Omega, which is still Shin, just with extra Dragon Balls. I mean, you see my point? Most of the others aren't very memorable. So, in that regard, I don't 100% agree with this. The only thing I can somewhat agree with is the Evil Dragons, because the majority of them I don't remember. And that, again, could just be because I don't watch as much as the other series. But they didn't come off as very memorable, so who knows. But there you go, my opinion on that. And then finally, I think this is the last one, is it? Yep, it's the last one. Number 13, Super Saiyan 4 is plain weird. While Goku is a kid for a large portion of GT, he oddly reverts back to being an adult during Super Saiyan 4. Additionally, this new transformation simply looks strange as Goku gains pink fur and features a regrown tail. The fan base admittedly split on Super Saiyan 4, as it is a major visual deviation from other levels. Some fans see this change as a good thing, while others really dislike it. I mean, I guess you could say it's weird in the sense of it's different from the original Super Saiyan line that we knew of at the time. And even by today's standards, I guess it is weird because it's not, it still doesn't follow the Super Saiyan line. So, and I've always kind of personally viewed Super Saiyan 4 as more of something that falls in line with the Ozaru rather than Super Saiyan line, because I don't remember the interview exactly, but I believe Katsuyoshi Nakashiro, when he was talking about Super Saiyan 4, no, it wasn't in that. It was actually in a guidebook. It was in the GT Perfect Files. When they're talking about Super Saiyan 4, they said something along the lines of, it's called Super Saiyan 4 out of convenience. So that line somewhat implies, or I guess hints at the possibility this is not technically a Super Saiyan form, but something else entirely. So there you go. Take that as you will. But, yeah, this article, like, as you can see, I didn't really agree with the majority of it. Some of it I halfway agreed with. Others is kind of like, meh. So, what do you guys think? Comment down below. Again, send no hate to this website or the guy that wrote this. We don't need that, guys. Come on, If you want to say anything bad about the guy, then just leave it down in the comment section below if you really want to say anything bad about the person who wrote this. I'm not going to link it down below because I don't want y'all going and hating on the poor guy that wrote this. But there you go. I hope to see y'all down there talking about it. Have a great day. Peace. Dragon Ball, Dragon Ball Z/Kai, Dragon Ball GT, and Dragon Ball Super are all owned by Fuji TV, Toei Animation, Funimation, and Akira Toriyama. I do not claim to own any of these. The video and any images that appear were used under fair use.